MuchMusic. Hey yo. Folks, I don't know about you, but do you know what satisfies my ears anytime I'm listening to music? It's when I hear a song and instantly recognize it as a sample. I even do the Leonardo DiCaprio and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood thing. I mean, think about all the songs from last year that contain samples. Everybody by Nicki Minaj, Agora Hills by Doja Cat, Lil Boo Thang by Paul Russell, a whole lot of them. Now, I've built my own platform partially off of talking about sampling in music, and MuchMusic has actually given me the stage to actually talk about why I think sampling is an incredible tool for creativity, while I dunk on the notion that it's not. See, for as long as I've been alive, sampling has been the subject of much debate and scrutiny on its artistic merit and its integrity. In the eyes of many, especially in the eyes of some musicians, sampling is seen as uncreative due to the fact that during the process, producers will take a bit of an intellectual property and build upon it or around it. Now, I'm not the biggest music major in the world that can break down the evolution of notes and how there's a specific sequencing of notes that persist in pretty much everything we've ever listened to as a way to illustrate how transformative music is. But if I were to take a stab at it, take for instance, and pardon me if I butcher the pronunciation of this word, Gymnopédie No. 1, written and composed by Eric Satie in 1888. That beautiful piece of music actually lives in many other songs, like Someone to Call My Lover by Janet Jackson, Gymnopédie off of the Get Backers OST, which was also sampled by Mac Miller for the song Traffic in the Sky. And unofficially, but very obviously, Flowers by Sweet Female Attitude, which was then sampled by the lovely Pink Panthers for the song Pain. It's this kind of lineage that makes sampling a beautiful thing. The beauty of sampling is that someone will hear a song and hear a specific part, whether it's a drum pattern or a bass line or a key melody, and feel inspired enough to build around or upon it to create something new. Not only that, but it also extends the life of the original song. It assures that even long after the original artist stops making music for whatever reason, they'll still be able to make money if people continue to be inspired enough to sample their music, thus extending the life of their music even longer to where it spans generations and introduces their work to a newer audience. Case in point, James Brown is the most sampled artist in music to where he was actually sampled as recently as last year on Coi Leray's song Man's World. The drum break for Amen Brother by the Winstons is actually one of the most sampled drum breaks in music, to where it's actually the foundation of an entire genre called drum and bass. While sampling is in some ways protected by fair use, a foreign concept to YouTube, it still faces legal obstacles that hinder it from being considered a respected form of creativity. This has caused artists to find ways around it. For instance, you have to ask the original artist that you intend to sample for permission as part of a process called clearance. And even if granted, they still must be credited and even approve the usage of the sample. Otherwise, they're taking you to court. Now, if you want to avoid that, there's also a practice called interpolation, where you can simply replay or re-record the part of the song that you actually want to sample. It's almost the equivalent of if you ask your parents if you can leave the house to hang out with your friends, but they tell you no, so instead you invite them over because, hey, they didn't say they couldn't come over. So if you wanted to sample the guitar melody for Shape of My Heart by Sting, but didn't want to use the original recording, then you can get someone else, or yourself if you're inclined, to replay the melody, even though Sting will more than likely own 85% of your song. Then that leads me to the issue of royalties, where the artists who are sampled are also compensated for the usage of their work, but that's a different conversation. I would argue that the act of sampling needs to be protected under a different set of laws and guidelines other than partial fair use and clearance. For one thing, I think that sampling needs to be protected the same way that covers are. Artists have the right to record a version of another artist's song, whether it's just the music alone or 2 lyrics, with or without permission. They could also change the original structure of the song to whatever suits them. So they could change the tempo, it could be a country version, it could be a reggae version, and then the artist could negotiate compensation afterwards. So why is this accepted and protected, but not sampling? What makes Frank Sinatra or Marvin Gaye covering Yesterday by the Beatles, albeit a different and distinctive version of the original song, more celebrated, respected, and safer by law than, say, Big Papa by the Notorious B.I.G. sampling the Isley Brothers? Now, before I go, I would like to hit you with a perspective that many people don't really think about. In 1968, a singer by the name of Linda Lindell recorded the song What a Man. She received a lot of death threats from white nationalist groups who didn't approve of her making and performing black music as a white artist, which prompted her to stop making and performing music. Then in 1993, Salt-N-Pepa sampled her song for their song of the same name, and because of the success of that song, it motivated Linda Lindell to start performing music again. In 1989, the funk group Zapp released their album Zapp 5, which relative to the rest of their catalog was not successful, forcing them into a hiatus. Then in the 90s, when hip-hop artists started sampling a lot of their music, it thrusted Zapp back into the spotlight, notably for the frontman of the band, Roger Troutman, who was then featured on Tupac's 1995 hit, California Love. Now, there are tons of stories and examples that I can bring up where an artist's music was sampled and the result was their work being reintroduced to a newer audience. My point is that for all the criticism and scrutiny that sampling gets from music fans and artists alike, it doesn't get the credit that it deserves for being a vehicle to not only extend the life of an artist's work, but also breathe new life into an artist's career. So there it is, my thoughts on why I think sampling is creative and artistic. Some of you may agree with me, some of you guys may not, some of you guys may still be on the fence of it being theft and uncreative and all that stuff. Regardless, whatever you think, comment down below. This is an open room for dialogue. That being said, much love.